you did cover it in the presentation. It was just, I suppose, a further follow-up regarding the £1,200 funding for equipment and training and things like that. I'd looked on the government website previously, and it referenced that £1,200 would need to be agreed with the gateway provider. So it may be that there'd be a percentage paid to the employer. So it was just to clarify if the placement provider stroke employer, I'm not sure what the right term is, would receive the full £1,200 towards it inferred that they would, but whether that would be agreed with yourselves or if it would be a percentage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a really, really good question. So actually the amount that is provided by the government is 1,500, and we would be getting 300 of that and passing 1,200 of that onto you guys. So you would receive the whole 1,200, but yes, there is that extra bit that we would be keeping just to be able to manage it.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Steve. Oh, you're on mute, Steve. We can't.
I'm trying to unmute. It's all right. I've done it. I think we're okay. It's just about the numbers going, really. You say you need to submit a minimum of 30. Do you have a maximum? I suppose I'm just concerned that there's, what, 20 or so of us here, and if we all put in half a dozen, does that make it too many, or what? How does that play?
No, that's a really interesting question. As far as I'm aware, I think that things are going in multiples of 30, but I know that there's loads of organisations that have already submitted way more than that, so we would be very happy. Obviously we're covering 2 quite big districts here, and we've already been having conversations internally to say that if we ended up getting closer to 60, or that was a possibility, that we would do that. So I'm not sure, other colleagues on the call might be aware of this. This is something we can look into, whether we could, for instance, submit 40 or 45 or something like that, but we would be very, very keen to make sure that every single placement that we felt was, you know, really high quality, that we were able to make sure that gets created.
Okay, so if we were to submit 2 or 3, that wouldn't be a problem.
I can say I've been on a couple of job centre things, and 30 is the minimum, but nobody's mentioned a maximum. I think that it would just have to look as if you could manage it.
Yes.
So if it was 45, 60, I can't see there would be a problem.
Brilliant, thank you.
Because of future jobs and how many you manage through that.
Yeah.
I know there's some intermediaries are submitting in blocks of 30, but I think that's their personal choice rather than there being a cap. It has to be a minimum of 30.
You could do 30 and then you do another 30 6 months later for the length of the programme.
Yes.
And applicants can have consecutive, so you could have 6 months. As long as you're not then ditching the person, which would be immoral, you can have another trainee.
Yes, thank you. So just Steve, in answer to that question, no, it wouldn't be a problem to submit more, request more placements than just 1. I think in the form we've actually put space for 5, but if you were really keen that you wanted straight away to submit more than 5, you can get in touch with us and we can amend the form for that as well.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any other questions from anybody? Yes, Glynis. You're just on mute, Glynis.
Sorry. I was just wondering, because Kira is such a small organisation and really kind of not funded by anybody, is there a minimum? I mean, could we just go with 1?
Yes, absolutely.
It's about creating meaningful opportunities within your organisation. So if you can provide 1 meaningful opportunity, that's far more beneficial than providing 3 that are all right. So if it's 1, great. If you can provide a few more that are just as meaningful and provide the same level of service and support to that young person, also great.
Thanks. Thank you.
Way back in Future Jobs, we did 1, and then we kept her on, and we did then 2 others, but we didn't keep them on because we didn't have the cash flow ability to, but we moved them both into employment. But we were quite happy to start with 1 because we didn't know what we were really going to feel our way through to do, and we're a bit more experienced now, and I would happily take 2. But I think, yes, you've got to remember they take time, and if you're going to invest quality time in them, make sure you've got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tanya. That's just reminded me, actually, that's a really good point. So when we ran the Future Jobs Fund project, we bid for X number of placements and we didn't know what those placements were going to be. And then we went out to the sector. So we filled the first 30 and then we got more. This scheme works a little bit differently because we're going to have to bid and name every single job title that's going to be created and include a job description for all of those jobs. So if you've kind of got it in the back of your mind that you're thinking, oh, well, we might want to, but we'll just start with one, just to be aware of the fact that a second one that you don't apply for now, we would have to go through the whole process of applying to government again, and it would be a second bid to DWP. So if you're thinking that you might create you might want to create two, but maybe one in February and one in March or one in April or something like that, it would be worth including both of them at this point, because it will depend on, if we get a lot of interest now and we put in for 50 or 60, we wouldn't then submit a second bid until we had at least 30 new on top of that. So it is probably worth, do think about it. Definitely don't create placements if you don't have the capacity to provide the support. But if you think that, so for instance, as Your Consortium, there's two different roles within our organisation where we were saying, yes, they're in different teams, we can definitely create the level of support for those, and we will be putting both of those in on this first round of applications. Fabulous. Okay. Yes. Brilliant, thank you. So just probably everybody is following the chat. Nick had asked about the cash flow situation, and Emma's just answered there. The £1,200 grant is pretty much paid straight away, and then it's monthly in arrears after that. So there is, and this is different to Future Jobs actually, because on Future Jobs Fund we got all the money up front and we paid it all up front as well. So we paid it ahead of it being paid out. So there's a small amount of cash flowing that needs to be done, and that definitely should be something you take into consideration when you think about how many placements you might want to create, and maybe even again, like maybe looking at staggering that as well, that could help with that. Louise has asked, when would the placements be expected to start? So some of that
as well.
Right, okay, yes, Emma's already put that. Yeah, depending on the turnaround. So a number of people had actually submitted back in September, and a call that I was at last week, they still haven't heard, even though it's supposed to be the 4 weeks from DWP. But I think it's like 70 new staff have just been appointed into this team within DWP. So things should start moving on that a lot quicker. I think for us, really from the point that we would find out, which we're expecting to be in January, certainly within the next couple of months from there. So if you're thinking like, oh, we're really interested in this, but maybe in the summer, then maybe this isn't the round to bid for it. If you're thinking actually January, February, March time, you'd be looking to create the placements, this would probably be the time to bid. Fabulous. Any other questions?
Oh, I've got one more. So just in terms of the longer term sustainability, so obviously it's a 6-month placement, but ideally it's about what the next step is for that young person and potentially creating permanent employment. Are there any targets relating to progression or tracking that information? Would there be expectations around that?
Yeah, so certainly not in terms of targets. There's not going to be anything, nobody's going to be measured on that. What I really want us to do as a partnership is to really kind of almost see that all of these young people that are going to come through on this partnership are ours, are part of our commitment to and wanting to give them opportunities in the voluntary sector. I think that if as an organisation we'll be coming out and having conversations all the way through this about how everything's going, and we'll talk to you at the halfway stage, maybe 3 months in, to say, realistically, do you think that there's going to be the ability to be able to create sustainability within your own organisation? And obviously, things are changing all the time, and I'm aware of that. But if at that point you're feeling like, this has been a really great opportunity, but we don't think that that's realistic, it would be about making sure that real, genuine support of supporting young people to be applying for other things. And this is part of the reason as well why we were really keen. sorry, there's some feedback and I can't work out where it's coming. Everybody's, oh, Tanya, I think it's from, everybody's on mute. Is why we didn't want to do a separate employability kind of job search type model, because actually we know that if you've been working with that young person, if you've been managing that young person, working with them, seeing their skills, you're going to be much better placed to be able to help them apply for other jobs, to be able to draw out what are the skills that they've developed, what is the experience that they've had, helping them to be able to do that work around identifying what the next right step would be for them. So there's not targets about it specifically, and we're not going to be doing it on that kind of basis, but we will be really working in partnership to make sure that, you know, ideally every single young person will go on to something positive after their placement on this project.
Is this open to any 18 to 24-year-old on universal credit? So does it include graduates and?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the only eligibility is about being on universal credit, and I understand, I'm not sure actually in West Yorkshire, but I know in North Yorkshire there's quite a high number of graduates who are now falling into that eligibility category. So
yeah, all I was going to say is when we created our first future job post, we weren't sure whether we would keep somebody, but we did. They worked with us for about 5 years, but the other 2 people we kept, we didn't have the cash flow to keep them. But we worked incredibly hard as they came towards the end of the placement to make sure they got the jobs they wanted. And I'm still in contact with them and they're still in work.
Okay, Elizabeth, just seeing your question about ATI. From my perspective, I think that a young person who has done a 6-month work placement and been able to do that probably would not be considered suitable for ATI, just because
I was sort of thinking of the ongoing support to find employment, which is one of the outcomes, but
yeah, certainly I would see it working more so the other way around. So just for some of our other partners here, Action Towards Inclusion is our North Yorkshire East Riding ESF employability programme, and that is very much focused on people who are the furthest away from the labour market. So certainly a young person who was coming off and they've, you know, immediately been employed, I wouldn't have said that they would be suitable. It can work the other way around though. We currently have 147 18 to 24-year-olds on universal credit on our ATI programme. So I know one of the things that has come up is, you know, how many placements are being created, how many young people are there. You know, even if we were creating 30 or 50 or 60 or something like that, actually we know that there's a lot of young people who are eligible for that provision. Certainly though, if a young person, I think a part of it as well will depend on what their situation is at the end. If they've had a really big life event that's happened that's really set them back, and actually they're going to need real in-depth support, then they could go on to another employability program. If actually the young person's been, you know, working well and they've been progressing and gaining those skills, I would much rather them go straight from the this job creation opportunity into another job. And there might be other provision as well available that's not designed for people who are the hardest to reach, that might be more suitable. You know, there might be a college course or other education provision and things like that that people could progress onto.
Do you want me to answer the other questions?
Yes, go for it,
So Edward, you've asked, can you take on 2 or 3 people doing the same role or job description? If there is capacity for those young people to do the same thing at the same time, I believe that's a yes. When I read the information a couple of weeks ago, my understanding was that it would, if it was going to be the same job, one person had to finish before the next person started. So there would have to be 2 independent roles. There might be a similar type of role doing, so I know we've spoken at Your Consortium about potentially having 2 Kickstart opportunities. They would be the same role but feeding into different projects. I don't know if that helps at all. You've moved on my screen.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Sorry, we would have capacity to do the same thing twice over at the same time. So yeah, as long as you do that, that's fine.
What we did, Nick, for future jobs, so we had sort of a midpoint evaluation that we were doing in terms of the placements. So we will be in regular contact with all of the placement hosts anyway, looking at, you know, so we'll be looking at all of the different elements. How do the referrals go from the job centres? Are we getting appropriate referrals from the work coaches? I would like to do some work as a partnership about how we make sure that the recruitment process particularly and the interview process is as valuable as possible for every young person you interview. So, you know, if you interview 5 young people, but you only have 1 job, actually there's 4 young people there who you have the opportunity to create a really good experience for them where they get that interview skills, and looking at how we make sure that we're giving really good feedback for young people as well. So at each of the different stages we will be, and I'm really keen that this is something actually that we co-develop as a partnership. So once, you know, we've heard that we've been successful and we know who all of the organisations are in the partnership, for us to get together and say, actually, what do we want the recruitment processes to look like, the interview processes to look like, what do we, you know, are there ways that we can kind of share about how we do inductions and trainings and how we can do that. So it will be something, organisations who've worked with us on ATI and Talent Match are aware that we put frameworks in place and we look at things, but then it's a real theory of change approach where throughout the programme we'll be looking at how do we make sure that this runs as smoothly as it possibly can for you guys as organisations and provides the most possible value for the young people on the programme. So we won't add in ATI levels of monitoring. There isn't very much in terms of evidence of spend and things like that because it's done through the pay-as-you-earn system and it's done through HMRC. But we will be looking at the quality of the placements, the outcomes for the young people, and really being able to celebrate that as well and show the impact that our project has, but also really showcasing the voluntary sector as a career option. Fab, thank you. Emma's answered the question there. Yes, Kickstart can be an outcome for ATI. And anything else that anybody else is delivering, so other partners in other areas that are delivering employability programs with young people, this is employment. It will count as a job outcome. Fabulous. Okay, I'm just checking. I don't think that we've missed any questions on the chat.